Welcome to the Squared Away Life podcast. My name is Camden Bucey. I'm happy to have you with me. Today, I'm going to be speaking with a special guest, someone I've been looking forward to speaking to for quite some time, Robert Rose. Robert Rose has spent 25 years at the intersection of marketing, strategy, and storytelling. He's worked with more than 500 companies, all the way from Salesforce to Roche Pharmaceuticals, as a fractional leader and consultant. He co-hosts This Old Marketing with Joe Pulizzi, one of my favorite podcasts, a podcast I've been listening to every Friday morning for more than 12 years. You can find Robert at Seventh Bear, seventhbear.com, which is an organization that provides modern marketing guidance for teams that want to work better, not just harder. They are strategists, they're storytellers, and system thinkers who believe marketing is at its best when it's human. And that's really what I want to speak with Robert about today. Robert is one of the clearest thinkers I've come across on what AI actually means for content and for marketing. And today we're going to get into all of that, but we're also going to talk about his book, Valuable Friction: How to Deliberately Stand Out in a World Obsessed with Speed. This is an awesome book, and it's going to be timely for you, for our listeners here at Squared Away Life. His book's a short, structured manifesto arguing that the relentless pursuit of seamlessness or frictionless design and instant answers, automated everything, that pursuit has produced a world in which almost everything looks, sounds, and functions the same. Now, Robert Rose's central claim here is that the path to differentiation runs not through more speed, but through deliberate, well-placed resistance. Now, the book's thesis is captured in a simple but counterintuitive reframing. It's that friction's not a problem to be engineered away, but rather it's a signal. It's a shaping force. And when designed with care, a competitive advantage. Rose distinguishes valuable friction from sludge. That would be friction that merely obstructs. And then he goes on in the book and he builds a practical framework around 4 forms of purposeful resistance. He names them as creative resistance, creative friction, strategic friction, operational friction, and then relational friction. And the philosophical spine of the book is really built on Stuart Brand's pace layering model, which he describes in the book. And he describes civilization as layers that are moving at different speeds. There's fashion, commerce, infrastructure, governance, culture, and nature. And Brand's insight is that tension between fast and slow layers is actually not a malfunction, but it's the mechanism that keeps systems stable and adaptive. Now, Rose maps this directly to how individuals and organizations can position themselves, not by syncing with the fastest layer, such as this pursuit of endless content, instant pivots, frictionless automation, but by operating at the boundary between layers where insight, influence, and originality actually live. Now, the book's structure mirrors its argument. Each chapter is self-contained and is designed to be revisited. Readers are actually explicitly told they don't need to read it in order. The chapters move from the philosophical case for slowing down, how fast is fast enough, and kill the easy button, to the AI/leadership dimension in chapters named Slower Than the Algorithm, to the 4-part framework, which is chapters 5 through 8, and then finally to a practical implementation where he speaks about the tools you need to put this into practice. That's in the chapter, The Practice of Friction, and then a closing, a summary, a manifesto of sorts, fewer, better, and bolder. So a central tension that Rose explores here throughout is AI's relationship to creativity and differentiation. And his argument is not anti-AI. He uses it actually himself quite a bit. But he does challenge the assumption that faster generation equals better output, noting that AI produces not average content, but actually the most probable content, which is meaningfully different. And the risk, he argues, is not that AI produces bad work, it's that unexamined reliance on it erodes the human capacity to know the difference, to exercise discernment and taste and judgment. And that capacity, he argues, is the last moat. Now, the book closes with the Fewer, Better, Bolder Manifesto. It's a meditation on choosing less, deciding with more deliberation, and acting with greater boldness because depth provides direction. But here's what I think the most distinctive contribution of the book is. Rose doesn't just argue for slowness. Now, that conversation is well worn. There are many books and articles in praise of slowness and about its virtues. But what's original in this book, Valuable Friction, is the design framing. Friction as something you intentionally architect into your creative process, your decision-making, your operations, and your relationships. It's not a retreat from modernity, but a strategy within it. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Robert Rose. Please like and subscribe to the video. Head on over to squaredawaylife.com and check us out on our YouTube channel. Here's my conversation now with Robert Rose. Robert, it's so good to have you with me. I'm so glad to have you. I mentioned in the intro that I've been listening to This Old Marketing for more than 12 years. It's my go-to Friday morning listening. And the people that know me from my day job with Reformed Forum, I know what that's like. I have, thousands of people that listen every Friday morning, and I have this, I don't know it until they meet me, but I have parasocial relationships with thousands of people. But now we've met in person a couple times and we've emailed, but now you get to experience, and I have to restrain myself because I have a parasocial relationship with you and I want to maintain a strict professional appearance here. So thanks, Robert, for joining me. And please, I appreciate your patience in advance for having to put up with a fanboy.
Oh, good Lord, stop. Yeah, thank you for having me. This is, I love both shows that you're doing. And I have appreciated our conversation so much through email and in person and all the things that we've talked about and all of that. And I totally identify with you, by the way, with the whole parasocial relationship. It is weird in so many ways to, there's an intimacy that podcasting provides that is, and I know this will get into some of the things we're going to talk about for sure. But when you have people come up to you and go, "Oh, how's your wife doing?" Or, "Oh yeah, you're a Cowboys fan,"
Right.
and you're like, how do you know that?
I know.
How do you, I don't know you. And you're like, oh, right. Cause you end up talking about it on the show and you're in people's heads. And it's like, there is an intimacy there for sure.
There is, and it's one-sided. I was talking with my wife about this morning. It's not fake, it's not false, and you do know people, but you know a certain perspective of them. But what's weird about the parasocial aspect of it is the other person doesn't know anything about you, about the listener, unless it's volunteered or offered by email or until you meet. Yep. And so that's what's odd when you meet fans, you meet people that really love the content, you meet them in person, that there's this huge imbalance in knowledge, which is atypical for a normal social relationship because usually there's back and forth and you learn things about people. And you and Joe have been doing this for more than 12 years. You had a little bit of a break there when Joe sold the company and took some time off. But I was so glad when you came back.
He messed up. He
messed up your totally subscribers.
Yeah.
He needed that time.
He broke us. He broke us.
Yeah. Well, the people that stayed on, hopefully you're building more back up. But I know many of us.
Well, it's a lesson. I will tell you that it is a lesson in podcasting and marketing and content. We often talk about the fact that consistency is way more important than quantity. And I will tell you, to this day, in fact, I was at South by Southwest speaking last week.
Yeah.
And had a woman come up to me after the talk and went, "I can't believe I'm seeing you here. I used to be a big fan of your podcast back in the day." And I'm like,
used to be.
We've been back for like 5 years. And she's like, "What?" She's like, "I thought you quit." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is like, it's one of those things where it's like you lose them. That little icon gets deleted off your iPhone. You're done, right? You're done."
Yeah. It's wild. Yeah, it's important to be consistent. It's a good lesson. You don't want to be putting out junk, obviously, but you guys have been doing about 45 minutes to an hour for ages. It's a long-running marketing news program, but tons of material on content marketing. And I was telling Robert even before we started recording just how helpful it's been for me running the nonprofit at Reformed Forum, putting structure and guidance and just as I'm listening on a Friday morning run, it's without fail, every Friday I go out for my run, and that's my go-to listening. And I'm always coming up with ideas. So whether you're talking about what I'm thinking about, it usually sparks a thought. And then there's
Well, that's
things,
good.
yeah,
That's
there's
good.
things
I
that
mean,
I
it's
think, oh, I need to be doing that, or this is a different way to think about it. One of those things was on the AI point. We were talking about
mm,
agentic AI, and you were speaking about that on This Old Marketing, and we're just asking if anyone out there was using OpenClaw, which people on
right.
this particular channel will know I've been playing around with that. And you asked people to write in because you were suspicious that anyone was doing anything of value. And I think a lot of it's hype. You're right, that a lot of people say, AI is amazing. It does all of these things. And then you often ask them, you said, well, what are you doing? And they say, well, it's so amazing. I do so many things.
Right.
But once you
Exactly.
actually drill down, there's really not they either can't tell you, which probably indicates that there isn't so much amazing, or maybe there's other ways to do this. So I'm hoping to get to the bottom of that, to talk philosophically about AI in general
Well,
and AI
yeah. How
agents.
long is this show? I
Yeah,
mean,
I know we've got about 45 minutes left, but you've been in this space, and I really think that, I listen to a lot of material on AI and marketing, and I love Paul Reitzer's show, and Mike
Yeah.
Kaput, his partner over there,
Yep.
Smarter X now, I think they've renamed it, their education side of things, but they do wonderful work. But you and Joe often bring this up because it's in the news, and then I listen to a lot of tech people and interviews that are, that's a former life of mine. But you're really right at the intersection of kind of where I live, largely. Not in the theology space, but in terms of the business and the tech and the marketing. And I really appreciate your structures, your models, and your thoughts, because you're the kind of person who's not a doomer, I take it, and but you're not also someone who's bought into the hype. You're thinking critically about AI and seeking to implement it, but to implement it with thoughtfulness and wisdom. And that's really kind of the heart of your book, Valuable Friction, and really the heart and soul of a lot of your articles over at Content Marketing Institute.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of that. I mean, especially promoting the book. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Um, look, as not to quote Friday Night Lights, but I'm going to quote Friday Night Lights, right? Full heart, full heart, clear eyes, can't lose.
Hmm.
And so I think that's my attitude on AI, right? And if we allow it to be anything other than something that helps us as people, then then why the hell are we even doing it,
Hmm.
right? And so in so many ways, you're right. I'm not a doomer. I don't think I don't believe that it's going to destroy mankind and become the Matrix and put us all in goo and use us as batteries and all of that. But nor do I think it's sort of the
Yeah.
magic, that it is proclaimed to be in so many ways. And that's really what I was getting to with the AI agent stuff is in so many ways, there's sort of three levels of what I'm seeing from the hype factory these days. And there is a hype factory, no doubt. I mean, it's
Hmm.
like, hey, the LinkedIn post, it's basically like, comment, DM me, and I'll send you my 4 charts on how prompting is going to change your life.
Right.
Right. And the three levels that I typically see on those AI agents are one, the stupid ones that's like, sure, I'm using an AI agent to take notes in my meeting and then send me the notes and actually attend the meeting for me and then
Right.
basically send me it's like, that's literally, this meeting could have been an email without this meeting could have been an email, right? It's like that is just a use case that is useless to begin with. So why would we want to design an AI agent to do something that's useless to begin with just because it can?
More
And
efficiently
then,
stupid, I
yeah,
suppose.
yeah.
Right.
And then the second level tends to be sort of okay, yes, it's AI and it's valuable and it's interesting and it's truly maybe even on the cutting edge of things. But is it an agent? No, it's just literally just running a pattern recognition on
Yeah.
a report or summarizing a meeting notes and truly valuable, truly
Hmm.
interesting. But an agent, not really there.
Hmm.
And then the third is sort of like where it's really happening. And those are just rare, useful use cases where it's actually it's really going down, but they're just so, they're so esoteric right now that most businesses aren't really there yet. And that was sort of my, that was sort of my take on it.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, just to try and unwrap some of the hype, I guess.
I loved it. And I think as I was listening to the podcast, I was thinking out on my run, of course, I'm like, no, we're doing some amazing things with OpenClaw. And I think that's true. But when you really boil it down, we get to what I think you called in one of our emails, IFTTT on steroids. And I loved IFTTT and other tools like it. People use Zapier and other things like that. But really, a lot of the agentic use out there in many ways is really a souped up version of linked scripts. And it's not necessarily thinking. It's useful.
Right.
It's
We used to call them
beneficial.
cron jobs.
Cron
back in the
jobs,
day,
yeah.
right?
Well, actually, literally, I do cron jobs with my OpenClaw.
Yeah.
One thing
Yeah.
you write about in one of your articles is you bring up a quadrant that maps AI use cases across 4 categories. Those are refinement, enhancement, supplement, and complement. And most people that are marketing AI to organizations, and you do a ton of this as a consultant and a fractional CMO, but a lot of these people that are really pushing the tools and the services, they're promising enhancement or complement. But your research and your actual boots on the ground experience suggests the bulk of real world value is actually being created in refinement and supplement. You mind unpacking that or explaining what that looks like? I think it would help people.
100%. And sort of, look, I'm a consultant, so I live in the world of quadrants, right? I mean, 2x2s.
2x2s.
Right. We have to do it. But what I was trying to get at there was less of a, like, the usefulness of the categories is not as interesting as the expectations that are getting set and reset in businesses today.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was trying to do with the quadrant is to say, look, that most of the use cases, and what I did was I ended up tracking about 500, 600 use cases across the last 18 months, stuff that I've heard, stuff that people are telling me that they're doing, stuff that I'm actually seeing in clients, basically looking out on the web and here and seeing all these things. And then I just sort of cataloged them.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I started to go through and catalog them in terms of what they were doing, a pattern started to emerge, which was basically, in the simplest sense, is it a new capability that makes us more efficient, or is it an addition or a supplement to a existing capability that makes us more or less efficient? And what I found was that it was basically most of the use cases that were actually getting done were actually new capabilities that were less efficient.
Yeah.
In other words, they were stuff that we either didn't do because we didn't have time, we didn't have the manpower, we didn't have the ability to do it, and now we can actually do them. So it's actually making us less efficient, but it is a new capability. Things like, cool translation and localization of our blog, really interesting use cases for AI that were those extra, it's now stuff that we should or could have been doing in the past with manual labor, but we don't because it was too expensive. We couldn't do it. We didn't have the hours to do it. And the interesting thing then is to unpack that versus what does the senior leadership, the CEO, the CMO, who is putting pressure on the marketing teams to actually create, what are they expecting? Well, what they're expecting is more efficient and new capabilities. In other words, giving us new abilities to do new things, but also do it with less people. And that mismatch is when you start to, the pressure comes, go find use cases for AI, go do AI. And they go, fantastic. And they go off and do all these things. And then they come back and tell senior leadership, well, it's going to mean more people and more money, but we're going to have all these awesome new capabilities. And senior leadership's going, no, I wanted you to figure out how I can fire Tony, Bill, and Bob so that we can actually do things with one person and vibe code our way to success instead of having 4 people there. And you're telling me the opposite. And that sets up this failure of AI to actually move the needle in business.
Yeah, you term this phenomena, this less efficient paradox. And it is so much in the news, and there's a lot of, well, who knows? We don't always know. You just saw what a Block did, and laying off thousands of people, alluding
which
to
is all theater, right? I mean, that's all
it
theater.
is. And you have other places talking about it. You have people whispering. Paul Reitzer and Mike, they over on their podcast talk about this all the time. It's a real effect, but I think the C-level people that are out there trying to make these decisions, they're just assuming that AI is going to come in and just eliminate tons of people, and it might, but you might end up with a worse product, and you might need to hire a
Right.
bunch or retrain a bunch of those people to actually review
That's
and
right.
improve the work that the AI does.
Right. It's like we've just done this historically. We have given sort of, demigod-like wisdom sort of perceptions to the CEOs of the world, right?
Yeah.
So when Dorsey does this at Block,
Mhm.
or when Bezos says this at Amazon, or whenever any CEO says, well, we're laying off 4,000 people because AI,
Mhm.
we go, ooh, not only was that a smart decision, but that was actually prescient. It was
Mhm.
really, they were seeing the future, right?
Mhm.
No, they're not. No, they're not. The street's beating them up on efficiencies. The street's beating them up on this. They're using either AI as an excuse
Yeah.
to do a layoff that they basically
Should
based
have
on
done.
bad overhiring
Yeah.
decisions they made in 21 and 22 and 23, or it really is AI. And this is, I think, largely what Reitzer and Kaput get
Mhm.
to. Yeah, it maybe really was AI, and they're making a foolish, short-sighted decision to basically replace people with machines that they'll ultimately come to regret.
Yeah.
So both of those things can be true, right?
Mhm.
Both of those things can be true at the same time, where they're not as smart as we think they are,
Mhm.
and they're not as prescient as we think they are. And even if they are, they may be making a short-sighted decision.
I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate working through this and thinking about my own role, my own job, and other people's jobs, people that work for me, with me, and thinking about what will be the role of the human in the future. That's a big question. It's a philosophical question. You address quite a bit of that in the book, and I wanted to ask you, just leading off the book talk in what you describe in
Mm,
Valuable Friction. You open up this book with this simple question: how fast is fast enough? And
right.
and this is always the constant pressure, right? We're always looking for faster, bigger, better, faster, cheaper, etc. And that comes as a consequence. But you say this tends to settle into a room rather than interrupt it. Explain this quote? How fast is fast enough? Where did that question first come from in your own perspective? Why do you think it creates the kind of quiet recognition when you ask it?
It came from, honestly, and I mean this honestly, so many of the conversations I was having, and it was especially true in the tech world,
Hmm.
technology world. But even that culture has bled into, just including, by the way, nonprofits, um, has really bled into all industries, which is when we would talk about marketing and communications and product development and all the various things that help a business move forward. It We have gotten wrapped around the axle of speed as the foundational value, right? And the example I use, it's such a fascinating conversation, and I even link it as one of the citations in the book, which is this conversation with Mark Zuckerberg that happened, I think 2 years ago or
Oh yeah,
2.5 years ago, where
right.
he basically talks about speed. The
Hmm.
reason that they're better than Apple is because they move faster than
Right.
Apple.
Move fast and break
And then
things.
as
Hmm.
the host starts to unpack that
Uh-huh.
and says, well, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, we can actually move quicker. We can move, we actually learn faster. We adapt quicker. And the host actually at one point goes, do you mean you pivot faster? You move it? And it's like, he's like, well, I don't want to overstate speed. And you can really
Uh-huh.
see him working out the fact that he doesn't really mean speed. What he means is agility.
Hmm.
He means the ability to change course more quickly is the strength that they have over it, not moving faster.
And to learn
And
faster. And
right.
right. Hmm.
But interesting. And then all of that happens and
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And then basically you can see all of the comments on LinkedIn sharing this post, and all the comments to the actual podcast itself is all like, yeah, you go, Mark. Speed,
Yeah.
speed, speed,
It's the
speed
wrong
is going
lesson.
faster is better. Speed is the value. And it's like,
Hmm.
wow, we've gotten to this place where move fast and break things has become literally the mantra of most businesses.
Hmm.
And when I would go into my clients and I would hear this over and over and over again, I would simply ask, how will you know when you're going fast enough? Like, how will you know? What will be the indicator to you that you're going fast enough? And because it would be like, we have to move faster, we have to
Mhm.
iterate quicker, we have to go fast, fast, fast. And I'm like, well, how fast is fast enough? Because there should be, right? There should be the right speed,
Right.
because at some level you got to figure fast. There is a fast enough to beat whatever it is you're trying to do, differentiate in the marketplace, compete at, scale, whatever it is you're trying to do. And when you start to really unpack it, what you really get to is, no, 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 we don't really mean fast. What we really mean is that we have to be able to react faster in a quick marketplace,
Mhm.
which is pivoting. That's friction.
Mm.
Literally, it is the definition of friction. The metaphor that I often use is, how do you know when a great tennis match is being, played, or how do you know when a great basketball game is being played?
Yeah.
You hear the squeak of the shoe. The
Uh-huh.
squeak of the shoe is not speed. The squeak of the shoe is friction.
Yeah.
And so that unpacks a whole other, say, way of operating in so many different ways. And that became sort of the whole theme of the book.
Yeah, and there's different kinds of friction as you expand and describe in the book. And what we're getting at here, though, is valuable friction. The book's structured
Yeah.
around that, and I'd love for you to explain that more. You already kind of did, but why is that word useful relative to something, or compared to something that might be a little more bland or soft or overused, like intentionality or
Right.
deliberateness? How does friction really capture what you're getting at? I think it
Yeah.
does, but I'd love to hear your explanation.
It's a great point. I actually address it in the book.
Yeah.
And because it, in so many ways, when we think about it, it really is moving with intention, moving with deliberateness, and all those kinds of things, which tend to have the connotation of slowing down, right? It tends to have that sort of mentality of, you should that the opposite of fast is slow, right? And
Mhm.
so, in other words, if I'm saying we're too wrapped around the axle of fast, then what I'm suggesting is slowness, and it's
Yeah,
not,
exactly.
right? I'm
May or may
not
not be. Mhm.
suggesting that fast is bad all the time. The point is that what we're trying to do is take a moment to understand where the decisioning is, so that
Mhm.
we apply our best and most valuable judgment against when to move fast and when not to move fast.
Exactly.
That's truly agility. So if and I didn't want to use the word agility because agile has just been so abused over the
Yes.
last 10 years. And so it's like, well, what is that? It is literally friction. It is literally, how do we actually create something that intentionally creates the difference between slow and fast.
Mhm.
And that's what friction is ultimately. It is actually the difference between moving slower and moving fast. It's that the tension that exists at the surface level between those two things, whatever those things are. It could be big strategy. It could literally be a decision. It could be, whatever it is, and the example I use in the book, just very quickly, is we don't notice these things, right? So what tends to happen is that these things start to become imbued into our habits and
Mhm.
our culture without us even noticing.
Oh,
The
yeah.
example I use is skipping the intro, right?
Oh,
The
yeah,
skip the intro
the
button
Netflix thing.
is yeah, it's a benign thing. It's a
Mhm.
stupid thing. But we have immediately accepted that getting to the content faster
Mhm.
by skipping the intro is a benefit to us as humans. And it's like, but is it? Like, if we just take a moment to go, but is it? Because why, if I'm a showrunner or if I'm a producer of an amazing show, why do I even care about the opening credits of my show anymore, putting beautiful music to it, or putting Easter eggs about what's going to happen in this episode in the thing, and thanking all of the writers and producers
Mhm.
and actors that are, and doing that. Why do I even care about that if everybody's going to skip the intro? And the reason is, if you ask those artists, they'll tell you, because it's part of the art. It's part of setting the mood. It's part of actually what I'm creating here that sets the mood. The opening credits
Yeah.
set the mood. So I'm not saying it's better to skip the intro or not skip the intro. I'm just saying we
You don't
never
even think
gave it
about it.
much thought,
Right.
right? We're not, and that's the only thing I want to urge in the book is, there's no answers here. Just questions like, are we skipping the intro too much in our lives for the things that would really maybe add value versus take away value?
Yeah, it is about intentionality, but it's about more than that, as you say, being deliberate. Another story you bring up, and I thought this was so vivid, and I have a very similar memories about listening to the radio. You speak about Jim Ladd, and you're trying to record songs
Yeah.
off the radio onto a tape, and just the amount of attention and work, and we can expand that illustration to buying an album instead of having Spotify and YouTube where you can listen to anything you want in a moment, in an instant. I had my few albums, but I'm tell you what, I knew those things inside and out. And the liner notes and everything. That also is a helpful lesson. Again, this isn't a value judgment per se, but look at the friction to getting music. But then once you have it, how well you know it, how it becomes part of you. But when everything's fast and easy, it's more of a commodity and you don't know it that well. And that's another wonderful example, I think, of a valuable friction.
Totally. I mean, it's and the interesting thing is that it happens again, it happens to the culture and we don't even recognize that it's happening unless you've had the prior experience. Right. And so, it used to be, and this is not just an old man yelling at clouds, right? But it used to be, when to get music, you would either have to listen to radio that would basically
For an
not
hour.
play what you wanted to play at any time, or you'd go to the record store, you'd buy the vinyl, you'd bring it home, you'd take the cellophane off of around it, you'd put it on your record player. And I can remember my first record, Boston, right? The first album from Boston is like, oh my God, it was the first record I ever bought on my own. And I came home, unwrapped it from the cellophane and put it on the turntable, opened up the liner notes of the thing and sat there literally for 45 minutes and listened to the whole album and read every lyric and literally sat for 45 minutes doing nothing other than listening to the music. That doesn't happen anymore, right? That just doesn't happen anymore. We don't sit in front and listen. Music is background noise. And I would argue that our inability to really have the artists mean what they did culturally to us in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the early 2000s, I would argue. And then sort of as we've evolved, musical artists don't mean that much to us anymore. We don't have that level of depth of meaning to our culture from musical artists that we used to. They're just celebrities who sing at us now. And so it's a real shame in many ways, but at the same time, we just never thought about it, right? Is that okay? Well, of course it's okay. It's happened. It's fine. It's what it is. It's gravity. It's there whether we like it or not. It's the way the world works now. But are we better humans for it? I don't know.
Yeah, and it might depend on the use case, where we are. I mean, there's a million things, a million ways we can go, and I want to get us back on track, but this might be a little bit out of left field for you, Robert, but I think people might be interested to hear about your experience with Lila Ray Hightower. And I was just listening to her this morning. And in preparation, but so I got a couple more views over there for you, but also the This Old Marketing ads. I think this is a good moment. I wanted to ask you about that. And given the fact we've just been talking about music, and people should know that you've written your own music, you've been involved in the music industry, you've sold music to TV shows before, so you have firsthand experience, but yet you're also doing a really interesting thing with AI and at the same time having fun and being creative and doing things that other people enjoy while not thinking that all music should go that way. And you're certainly not comparing it one-to-one with, the Rick Beatos and other people out there and their perspective on things.
Yeah. I mean, so Rick's real mad about this stuff. He's
got a place for it here and there, but you're right. Yes. And I love Rick's channel. He's amazing, but you're right.
I love Rick's channel. I watch his channel religiously. It's love amazing. His interviews with musicians and his takes and all that kind of stuff. And I've got literally in my drafts folder, I've got, two at least, maybe three letters to him.
To Rick.
Yeah, to try and explain myself that I have not yet sent to
Uh-huh.
him. You know, mostly because I have major imposter syndrome on that kind of stuff. But I've been playing for as long as he has. I mean, I'm as
Mhm.
old as he is.
Mhm.
So I all the stuff that he talks about, I know. You know, from my perspective is, you know, where I've landed on this is that AI music isn't any different other than the same technological evolution that we have seen for the last 40 years in the world of music. And that has come at faster and faster iterations. You know, you talk about agility, right? It's
Mhm.
coming faster and faster iterations, but AI is just the latest, you know, of it. You know, before AI, you know, we had situations where there were literal digital packages I could purchase,
Oh,
software
yeah,
packages
totally.
that for choirs, right?
Yeah.
Where I could literally type in the words that I want the choir to sing, and then the choir would actually sing it against a melody that I would put in. Is that okay?
Mhm.
Right? Is using the sampled drums, you know, from a Phil Collins, you know,
Totally.
and using that sampled drums, playing it on my keyboard, and those sampled drums that come from Phil Collins, is that okay? You know, and so there's this ever sort of gradation of lines that somebody has to draw somewhere where is that okay? Is that real music? To me, it's music if it's music.
Mhm.
And the way that I use it, and I'm experimenting and playing, is basically the technology's finally caught up to something that I've wanted to do for a long time, which is as you mentioned, I'm a songwriter. I've written songs and lyrics. I'm not a singer. I don't play multiple instruments. I play piano. I've done electronic music. It always sounds like electronic music. But I don't like electronic music that much. I much prefer sort of country rock
Yeah.
and sort of that's my jam is outlaw
Outlaw
country
country.
back in the
Yeah.
day. So I had created this persona years and years ago. 10 years ago I had created this persona of an artist that I wanted to actually go out and do a guerrillas style sort of thing where it's like an unknown, you know, you didn't know who or whether they were real or not or whether it was a real band, and basically create this music. Well, the technology's finally gotten there with imagery, with
Mhm.
AI, and all of that to be able to do some of that stuff. And I've been playing around, and that's what Lila Ray is basically that persona, that character that I've
Mhm.
created. I'm upfront about it. It's on the website that this is a project. This is AI. I'm not trying to fool anybody.
Right.
I'm not trying to go out and win a Grammy, and I'm not trying to go out and do any of those things. I don't know what I want out of it, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. You know, other than I'm having the time of my life playing with it, I'm writing new music, which I haven't done in 10 years.
Mhm.
I'm writing that new music and having AI do the arrangement for me and have it add vocals for me to my lyrics. So I'm having it's truly a creative project that I'm really
No,
loving.
it's
And
fun.
then I think I'm going to write a book about it. So there you go.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading that whenever you're ready. I know you mentioned that on the podcast too, but yeah, there's no one-to-one correspondence. You're not saying that this is exactly the same as what, the Nashville, songwriters doing on their own in their, their own studio and that sort of thing. But it's also not music, if I can use that double negative. And it's
Right.
it's fun to listen to, but yeah, you're upfront about it. You're not trying to trick anyone, but you have this constructed persona. So she has a look. She's in music videos. She has a voice that you've fashioned and you can
Yep.
reuse using the tools. It's a frontier and it's interesting. And you've
Yeah.
you've even created what, a YouTube channel, a Spotify channel, and you're learning the inside of the business
She's on
of
all the play, and I've learned so much about that whole business, the
yeah,
modern music business along the way, which was a whole industry that I thought I knew, you
right.
know, in the 90s, right, when I was actually doing stuff, and is so different now. It's so different now for musical artists that are out there, and I've had to learn like what it's like to be an independent artist trying to make your way
Mhm.
in this. And I'm putting like, 10% effort into it, right? You know, I mean,
Yeah, but there's
I
still, of
know artists that are like putting their lives into this and trying to make a
course.
living at it, and it's really hard. And so, yeah, it's been both a learning and fun creative exercise for me, and as well as sort of very self-satisfying.
Yeah, and I think that's a good use case for people maybe to think about, a good example, through which we can consider the types of friction again that you mentioned in the book. You speak about 4 forms, creative, strategic, operational, relational. So we see a lot of creative friction here, and there is still some, and there's others.
Right.
You're not just going and hitting a prompt and say new song, but you're actually uploading tracks and ideas. You're writing your own lyrics, even for the ads you do for this whole marketing. There's a place for all that, but Robert, I'd love if you could speak about these 4 areas of friction. I don't know if we want to take as much time as you want, but even talk about Stuart Brand's layers. I know that's another important part of your book.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a geeky part. That
but it's
gets, yeah.
good. That's the
Yeah.
stuff I love. And
Yeah.
breaking this down though is helpful to distinguish not only valuable friction from sludge or a friction that is unhelpful, but then to think about that through different dimensions, the 4 kinds, but because you can have valuable friction and sludge in the creative department, in strategy and operations, and in your relations as well. And I really enjoyed those 4 chapters particularly.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad that, well, as I started working through the book, it struck me. And by the way, and I say right at the beginning of this, there may be more than 4 categories, right? The 4 categories for me were, they basically matched sort of, head,
Head,
heart, soul, and muscle, right?
Yeah.
And so parts of the body, right?
Yeah.
And so as much as possible, I wanted to bring this back to the humanity of it. So it's like, what is it helping us scale, or what is it helping us, how does friction help us understand those various aspects? And so from a creative standpoint, it literally is the restrictions that we place upon ourselves to get to wisdom and discernment. I use the example of Rick Rubin, right? Rick Rubin doesn't play music.
Right.
Rick Rubin doesn't know very much about music, but the entire reason that he's as talented and successful as he is because he employs friction in the creative process and basically brings his own discernment and wisdom to it, right?
Yes.
So for me, Beato did this interesting thing where he was railing on AI and music, and he basically goes, "Well, I just had Claude come up with some lyrics, and I had and then I threw that into, and I said, give me a genre, and out came the song, and it was right,
Yeah.
and it's like."
Yeah, of course it was.
And I went, well, of course it is, Rick. I mean, you didn't. I mean, of course, duh.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if I sit down at a guitar, which I haven't sat down at a guitar in 10 years, and I started playing stupid stuff, it wouldn't be any good either. Right. And so the point is that you take the time to actually put the wisdom and discernment into what the tools are actually producing. And maybe you can come up with something good. Maybe you can't, but that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Then there's sort of the strategic. So that creation is the head, right? Is it basically, then there's strategic, which is ultimately your gut, right? Your gut instinct. Like, where are you moving to? How are you moving through the world? From a startup business's standpoint, it's like, yeah, maybe let's take a minute before we ship that thing. Maybe let's not put out the beta version that doesn't work. Maybe let's not think about moving as fast as we can, because that's not the most valuable thing that we can do. And it's taking that moment, that valuable friction. And then ultimately the operational, or the muscle, is basically, how are we operating in the world? This is literally the move fast and break things thing, the just ship it idea, right? So in that production meeting, in that brainstorming meeting with product development, maybe let's take a minute to sort of like open the meeting with like, what's everybody struggling with today? Instead of just moving right into sort of the agenda, like actually taking a moment. I use the example, I think, in the book of the CEO who literally takes a minute to, because Sunday is when they love to send the giant missive to the rest of the team saying, here's what we should be doing. Here's what we should be thinking about. The CEO and going, you know what? I'm going to write this email because it's when it's convenient for me to write it, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to let it sit till Monday so that I'm not going to ruin everybody's Sunday by trying to do it faster. And then ultimately, and this is one that could be its own book, is the relational stuff. And this gets into how social media has really smoothed things for us, where we don't like tension in discussions anymore. We don't argue anymore. We don't debate because people get triggered because they don't want to be triggered into conflict. We don't talk about politics anymore. We don't talk about the important things in theology. We don't talk anymore. We can't call people anymore. Like literally you don't take a cold call from your mom anymore, much less somebody because we just don't want to talk in person because it's really weird. There's this. And so adding that level of friction to relationships is such an important aspect of what we've lost. And so, but that's going through all four of those and examples of them, and just having us pause for a moment and go, oh,
Hmm.
yeah, maybe I should have lunch with my friend instead of that Zoom call. That, maybe I should actually take the time
Right.
to really ask how they're doing, rather than sort of performatively saying, "How you doing?" And being fine with, "Fine, I'm fine, great."
Hmm.
Now let's move on to the business, right? It's like, no, no, how are you really? Like, let's talk about that, right? And it's like that stuff is friction we have in so many ways lost, that is not making us better humans in the
No.
process.
Yeah, I think Peter Drucker brought this up in his book, The Effective Executive, if I'm remembering correctly. But it's, we always talk about efficiency, and that's somewhat related to speed, talking about faster, cheaper, et
Yeah.
cetera. But
Yep.
efficiency is not the same thing as effectiveness. And you don't
Right.
necessarily, it's good to be efficient, but sometimes the most important things in life are not efficient, and by design. You think about your
Yeah, that's
relationship with your
exactly right.
spouse, your family members, your best friends. You don't sit down and say, how can I be more efficient in this dinner? No, you want to think, how can I
Yeah,
be a real friend and get to know somebody truly?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This kind of
Exactly.
brings
You will
things.
not be measured on efficiency at the end of your life.
No. This man was extremely efficient in his marriage.
Exactly.
It doesn't work. I heard something that even this morning on another podcast, Diary of a CEO. It's a pretty popular podcast with Stephen Bartlett, but he had an investor on I've heard before, Daniel Priestley, give this. Not related to Jason, I don't think. There's a 90s reference
Yeah.
for you. He gave an illustration. They were talking about AI and the role of it and the place of it in the economy and the effect it's going to have. And the reason I bring this up is it's going to get to what's distinctly human and how humans and AI agents particularly might relate to bring us home, so
Mm,
to speak. But he
right.
gives this illustration about even the agricultural economy. And he said in the agricultural world, really the soil itself was sort of kind of bringing about the most economic value, but it couldn't do it on its own. And it was still the farmer's job to know when to plant and to know when to harvest. That brings things back to what you were mentioning. If Rick Beato complains about the AI not producing good output, that's not exactly the point. The human
Exactly.
has a distinctive ability to know how to approach it. A skilled human would know how to ask questions, how to guide it, but really, especially know when it's done. The AI could just go on forever and ever. You keep saying, keep working. It's just going to spit stuff out. It doesn't know what's good. It doesn't know, have taste or judgment itself. You can kind of approximate those things, but at the end of the day, there's some unique value that an individual brings. And every human has their own view, their own perspective, their own values. But there's something unique there. And that kind of gets back to what we were talking about in our email exchange and bringing up AI agents. And even if they're fully autonomous, there's going to come a point where the AI Pinocchio agent, wants to become a real boy. And the question is, how will he do that? Is it even possible for the AI Pinocchio to become a real boy and to offer the kinds of things that humans offer with empathy, judgment, taste? You mentioned wisdom, discernment. That's really, to me, the heart of it all.
Yeah. You used that metaphor in the email exchange we had, and I love it so very much. Yeah, I mean, it gets to, it was, Ben Affleck who said this really well. Even if he
Yes.
got the
Mhm.
semantics a bit wrong, I think, but when he talked about
His
AI, he
basic
said,
point was
look,
sound, yeah.
yeah, he said basically AI, there's craftsmen and there's artists,
Mhm.
right? And he said AI is a craftsman because, a craftsman knows how to do something and an artist knows when to stop,
Mhm.
right? And so and yeah, the craftsman, artist, okay, we can debate about that. But the point was well made, I
Mhm.
think, to what you're saying is, which is, judgment, right? It's like, can Beato create a better song with Suno than someone who's never used or
Oh,
doesn't know music or doesn't have any experience in music? I would gather yes. In other words, he would know after the third iteration of the prompt and basically, uploading his own melody or, basically taking the time to write good lyrics and his knowledge and experience and wisdom around all of that, would he create a better song with Suno than someone who's never studied music before?
Of course.
100% I would say yes to that, right? So the problem is that we tend to, and this is where the doomers of AI tend to come in, is they immediately slough off AI output as average. And they say AI output is always going to be average. And it's like, no, it's not. It's going to be probabilistic. In other words, and there's a very big difference between average and probabilistic. The probability that AI is going to emerge with something brilliant is probably lower than it is for you to come out with that brilliant thing. The interesting thing, however, is that it is the value of the creation is created in the consumption of the thing, not in the creation of the thing. In other words, you can't recognize that it's brilliant until you can recognize that it's brilliant. And so when we look at Beato being able to say that's a good song versus the newbie who would create a song and call it brilliant, well, no, the chances that Beato's version is going to be that which is consumed and considered brilliant is much higher because he's got the taste and discernment and wisdom to be able to know when to stop. And that's why having human skills here is so important, and why my biggest advice for young people, and I literally was at South by Southwest saying this to professors and students that came for South by Southwest Edu, was the prodding is go get good at AI, and my prodding is no, go get good at the thing you want to get good at, whether that's music or strategy or operations or legal or whatever. Go get good at that thing, and then AI will help you be better at it. And that's ultimately all it is your ability to consume and understand what brilliant and good looks like. That's the skill. That's it. That's the entirety of the skill, is to understand when to stop and when to say it's ready. It's ready for public consumption, or it's ready for my own consumption, right? I don't care if anybody likes Lila's music. I like it. And the people will tell me whether they like it or not. It matters not how I created it.
No, that's an important way to think about it. And I think very valuable too. The AI, I always view it as kind of like it's leverage. It's one of two things, especially in writing or any creative endeavor. I do a lot of writing, I'm an author and do other things, speaking. And you think about, well, what can AI do? It could just spit out a keynote address. Is that wise or smart?
It will.
No, it will
totally do that.
Whatever you want, and it'll do it
it'll give you the
seconds.
PowerPoint. The Claude will give you the PowerPoint, the bullet points, the speech, the whole. It'll do it all.
But the beautiful role here is, for someone who has put in the time, who does have the knowledge, the expertise, and the desire. I found that AI, acting as a research assistant or as a partner, a brainstormer, that's where the rocket fuel is. Because I can go 100% whenever I want. I can wake up right in the morning with an idea, and I have some good friends, but I don't have any friends that are going to take a call at 5:10 in the morning and just want to go to town on an idea with me, right? Like they're going to say, get lost. I don't want to talk about this right now. But the AI will have a conversation with me, and I could say, well, here's what I'm thinking, let's steel man this, or give me criticisms on this, or I can go back and forth with it as a brainstormer, as a partner, without replacing my thought, but just providing me another challenging perspective or a sounding board to run ideas on. And I think that iterative loop and using it in that form is quite helpful. But there's never any expectation that the AI is going to think for me, because if it does, then what am I? I'm just a puppet. That's right. I'm loaning my name to a machine or loaning my voice to a machine, and what good is that? It's hollow and fake. But if it's a tool that makes me better at who I am and what I do, then I'd say, use it. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's my bumper sticker advice on that is basically I look at everything that comes back from any AI LLM with a question mark at the end. It's only there to help me wrestle with things harder. And this is what AI is really, 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 really good at. It's pattern recognition and mashing things together to recognize the probabilistic patterns that thing exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to you to put the two things together, to mash the two things together, to say this. That's all creativity is, by the way. It's just putting things together in an interesting way.
Yeah.
And so take this and this, put it together, and say, tell me what the patterns are about this. Help me wrestle with this idea, right? And pull forward the patterns. And it'll pull interesting things together. Sometimes it's banal, sometimes it's wrong, but you have to be able to recognize the difference and say, great. Now, what about this? And what about that? What it's helping you do is iterate and interestingly iterate in more deeper and more thoughtful and creative ways than you might otherwise. This brings us back to practical or to valuable friction, which is this idea, AI, this is what I find so fascinating about the whole business case here and then wrapped around to speed is AI is the first technology in I don't know how long that is literally inviting us to slow down, think more deeply, think more creatively, wrestle with things harder. And as a culture, we're doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, we're just outsourcing
we're using it
everything
as a crutch to move faster. It's like, man, are we wasting? Are we wasting an opportunity here?
Yeah, I think economically that's just that's a slow and a fast and certain death. If we're approaching AI that way, and you're trying to get that incremental knowledge improvement, you speak about this in the book. It's really helpful, and I encourage people to read it. But the CEO's job now is not just to know more, but it's to offer wisdom and slow down and think and to do really what's human. But you might get a little bit of an incremental gain for now if you're using AI a little bit more intelligently than your neighbor. But that's going to erode. And if you're just seeking, well, I'm going to know a little bit more, and therefore that's my competitive edge, and you're not offering any human value. You're not offering any value in terms of your relationships, your charisma, your particular voice, your perspective. That'll get replicated. And it will become, intelligence will be commodified. And if that's where you're going to camp out, you might last for a month or two, but that's it. The only thing that people can't replicate, this is the old marketing lesson you guys always talk about, but you can't replicate the way you speak to people, the way you communicate what your voice is essentially. And I would add to that, your relationships. And that's where you need to spend time.
That's the key, right? Is the relationships is the real key. That the leaders of tomorrow will be those who can manage and stitch together multiple relationships. That's it.
That's a human thing. Well, the book we've been talking about here with our wonderful guest, Robert Rose, Valuable Friction, How to Deliberately Stand Out in a World Obsessed with Speed. This book's awesome. And also check out the writings over at seventhbear.com. I'll have the links in the description, as well as Content Marketing Institute. Robert, it's so fun. Thanks for taking an hour to speak with me. It was really a good time.
Oh my gosh, so much good. Yeah.
Well, everyone can watch and listen and follow up. Head on over to the website. Not only click the links in the episode description, but you can find us at squaredawaylife.com. We'll see you next time.